welcome to Drachenwald Files and today's interview. And let's start with introducing yourself.
I am Magdalena Grace Bain, normally just called Maggie. I am a Baroness of the court, and I am a current vigilant for the Order of the Laurel. Hashtag longest vigil ever.
Just three right now that are waiting for your vigil,
Yes.
or more or less waiting for an event where you can have your vigil.
Yeah. I reside in Knight's Crossing, the barony of. It is mundanely all of Germany. I reside in the canton of Termstadt, which is an extensive canton that extends from my borders, which are Bamberg-Lichtenfels, all the way down to Regensburg. And we currently even have a member as far west as just on the Czech border.
How?
Yes.
Germany is a big country, come to think of it. It is.
It's bigger than people think it is.
Yeah, because I have been sadly only at one event, and that was the coronation for me and Morales.
Yeah. Yes.
And that was at the southern part, not near Frankfurt, but at the same height as Frankfurt. And I think it took us 11 hours to drive from Köln.
Yes, that coronation would be in my region. It was held by Knight's Crossing, but specifically Termstadt, who hosted. Anna, who we've spoken about, was the autocrat, and I was your feast cook.
I know, and that was the first time we met.
Yes.
Yes. And man, did I enjoy that feast.
Well, I asked you what you would like, and you said meat, and more meat. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think both me and Morales are very easy to please when it comes to feasts. Give us meats, mushrooms, and bread, and we'd be super happy. But it was so much more than just, a piece of meat. It was pies, and there were homemade bread, and there were fried mushrooms. Gonna continue talking about you and not just the feast. So I usually start at the end of people's SCA career, and that is your first really good memory of the SCA, the ones that got you hooked.
It's very interesting trying to think about that for me, because I have not one, but sort of two stories, because this is my second kingdom I've lived in. In the East Kingdom, I started. It was 1992 when I went to my first meeting.
So that means almost 30 years now?
Yes. Oh, danke. Tissue. Yes, about 30 years. And the meeting was fun. And then I went to one event, and then I had some things come up in life, and then I was reintroduced to the SCA and people a couple months later. And my first camping event was a small war called S&M War. And it's now renamed Great Northeastern War. But it used to be, it used to be Stone March and Malgentia. So S&M War. And that probably was the first cementing of this is a fun hobby. I got to camp, I got to meet lots of people. I got to hang out on a horse farm, on a bay, go pick fresh mussels when the tide went out. We had a really good time.
Oh, yeah,
So,
I can hear that.
That was my first, it's fun. And then Drachenwald sort of cemented itself a little more slowly, sort of as I got going. And I really didn't become cemented until people realized I wasn't leaving. Because I came with military, and the habit is military in, military out.
Yeah,
And then,
that is, and especially in Germany, there are a lot of American military bases, and
yeah,
usually people only stay like a couple of years.
it's between 3 and 5 years is the average.
So we have a lot of people moving in and out there.
Yeah.
When did you move to Drachenwald?
I moved to Drachenwald in spring of 2002. I moved at the very end of March, and I attended my first event in, I think, May. No, June. Must have been June. Because a couple weeks later, I then attended what was traditionally called at that time the Nibelungen War. And that was only my second event at Drachenwald, where I was thrown out of my own camp for being too loud.
Ouch.
Well, our whole camp was actually thrown out of our camp for being too loud.
But I hope you had fun being too loud.
We had way too much fun.
Well, one usually does. I have never been thrown out anywhere before because of being too loud. No. Yes. So, favorite event, and I guess this will be a double question too, because you have lived in two kingdoms. So,
Yeah. So favorite event is very difficult, and it actually breaks down probably to three. My favorite event in the East Kingdom sadly no longer runs. It was the East Kingdom War College, and it was held in Glen Lynn, New York, and there was a river at the back of the site where we could go swimming every day, and it was a 4-day war college. It focused on fighting, it focused on tactics, it focused on the heavy fighters. But there were some classes, and one of the best classes was breed brought a sheep, which was shorn the first day and slaughtered. And then literally we used every bit of that sheep before the weekend was over.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And also a little bit like, poor sheep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I eat meat, so of course I know that
Yeah.
slaughter is a thing. It's important to do it in a humane way, if you can say that.
Yeah.
But very interesting because, I mean, that is very period. They didn't throw much away.
No. I mean, between literally from everything from blood sausages to, roasting and preserving and, everything we could.
So that was the East Kingdom favorite event.
That was the East Kingdom. Here in Drachenwald, it gets so hard. There's so many, I love Double Wars. I love it because it's a nice long event and I get to spend time with lots of people. I have never failed to have a fantastic time. I loved Raglan when I went. It was, beautiful, but different. It's a very different environment than Double Wars. And then we have our own here, our own small events here. We don't have a war in Central Region. We're just not really big enough at the moment. But we have smaller events. And I guess my favorite local small event would be Arts in April, which is a teaching focused event, but it's very relaxed. It's about 40 people, and I cook. I cook for the event. So that's probably my favorite event to cook for.
I love cooking for smaller events because then you can do all those little extra things because you have the time and energy instead of when you have to feed like 110 people.
The largest
way of cooking.
It's very different. The largest event I ever cooked for was a known world's dance symposium that was in Germany, and it was about 150 people, and I did lunch and dinner Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday it was lunch and feast.
I think I have not been cooking for that many. I think 110 is my limit.
Yeah.
They did in general a normal sized kitchen, home kitchen,
Yeah.
on one stove and some extra plates, and that was a challenge. But I mean, that is something that you learn when you are a fistocrat a lot. I guess you adapt to your you adapt to the kitchen, because not all sites have great industrial kitchens.
Mm-mm. In my blog, I have detailed a what I call the feast from hell, and that kitchen is terrible. We stopped using the site, thankfully, because the kitchen was just so terrible.
Mhm.
I had gone about a week, maybe 2 weeks before, to check everything, make sure everything was okay. When I arrived on site, I found out that all of the racks for the ovens had disappeared.
Oh no.
No idea where they went. So baking pies got interesting.
Hey, Captain. So yeah, going back to feast.
The culture around food has changed quite a bit in the last 18 years in Drachenwald. So
I agree. I agree. Um, in what way do you think it has changed most?
um, we used to have very few cooks who cooked from period sources.
One moment, just one moment. He is making havoc in the bedroom. Pig. There. Okay, so I was asking, in what way do you think that the food culture in Drachenwald, and the culture around feast, have changed?
As I began to say, that we had very few cooks cooking from period sources. They primarily cooked period-ish food, or using period foods, period techniques, but not necessarily documented period dishes. So we've moved more towards period stuff, which is nice. We have a whole lot more blend, I think, of styles and cultures that we pull from. Here in Germany, almost every feast was German. Mistress Stella, who was elevated for 15th century German cooking, and Master Giano, who was also elevated for German and Roman cooking. So we had a lot of German feasts until I arrived and started cooking.
Understandable if you have people that know the stuff.
Yeah.
And I also think that I totally agree with you there. We have seen a path towards more period food from actual period recipes, more close to what they presumably ate. But I also think that is because we have had more and more cooks interested in it, so we have kind of started to gather a little.
Well, I think for cooks, it used to be you fed people because people needed to be fed. And cooking sort of got relegated to service. And it's really been the last about 10 years where cooks have gone, I'm not just here to cook, I'm here to display an art as well.
Yeah, and you still need to feed people, but you can do it.
Yeah.
Knowledge about, I mean, the recipes that we have and the books that we have are usually from kings and queens and highborn people that had the money to have a cookbook. Uh, so that means that the recipes are kind of not like, average Joe's Thursday supper.
Yeah. The sources we have are generally ones that came from nobility. What Bob the farmer was eating for his Sunday dinner, we can guess it was lesser versions of. and very simpler foods. The closest we can sort of get is they've done a reconstruction of foods that might have been eaten from Martin Luther, who was said to have kept a very, very simple diet, more in line with the common man than the nobility.
Yeah, well, he wasn't so much for, the fab and extravaganza.
Yes, yes. And so when they excavated his cesspit, they began to molecularly break it down, and they've written a book on the potential. These were the types of foods that were being eaten.
That sounds really interesting. We mentioned your blog.
Yes.
So I'm going to put a link down here to your
Okay.
blog for people, and also in the description if people wants to find your blog. I have used your blog and I think it's excellent, so I do recommend it.
Well, for me, starting out cooking was difficult because when I first started in the SCA, there was no internet.
Mm-hmm. I know.
I couldn't look up things. I couldn't, so you had to count on what your local library might have. If you were lucky and came from a university town, you could use a university library. And then as the internet began to slowly, everyone began to have it at home. The two sources I used as a beginner were Cariadoc's Miscellany and Stefan's Florilegium. And I still, as beginning cooks, I recommend you go to these two sites, you read their articles, use recipes from there, just get your feet under your ground, your feet under you.
Link down there and in the description. Because I do think, food is important. People need to eat. In what way do you think food matters at a SCA event, except for just keeping us fed?
Well, for me, food is love. Plain and simple. It's it was used in my family to show love, etc. And it's for, my desire to do period cooking comes from my love of the game that we play, my love of the hobby, and the respect for that. And then wanting to produce for other people is a way that I can give. I'm not a textiles person. I sew because I have to, not because I like to. I don't do much musically. So really, when you begin to focus and you begin to find where is my place, I found my place was the kitchen.
And well, you were doing good things in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So I've been told.
Yes, getting a writ for peerage and all for it. And if I look at the side sometimes, it's because the cats are making strange noises. I'm not uninterested in what you're saying. I'm listening. And I agree. For me, it's also, I recognize so much in what you are telling about food and how it's a way of showing love. For me, the feast, it's just not to sit down and eat good food. It's also making people connect, and you can sit down next to people that you might not know at all, and still you will have something to talk about, because you can always talk about the food. And it is a way, sharing bread with another person. It's always historically been an act of friendship.
Yes.
Or at least, like, I am not hostile here, have a piece of my food.
Yeah. And very much our feasts, I think, connect people that way. A lot of people say, oh, well, the same people collect together. And if you think about it, sometimes they do, because if you really look at that group of people, they're from every corner of our kingdom, and this might be the only chance they have to sit and talk to each other. And I'll wait till the car goes by.
Okay. It's gonna be.
So that might be the chance they have. And sometimes, people are sort of intimidated to break into a group like that. But if there's space and you need a seat, find these groups, sit down with them, get to know, you get to know a whole section of, different sections of the kingdom all at the same time.
I mean, I was in the kitchen for so long in the SCA when I started. I was a little bit like, I will not have anything to do with that sect. I will stay here making my pies. That was sadly my start at the SCA, but I got over it. But then when I started coming out of the kitchen and stopped making feast all the time or working in the kitchen, I was a little bit lost. I was like, ooh, I know all these people, but I don't have a group. But that was actually never a problem because, well, I am a person that likes to meet people. And like I said, when you are eating together, it might be a little, that takes some time before you start talking, but you always have food to talk about. So sitting down and just like, oh, there's a seat available. Excuse me, can I sit here? I totally agree with you that is a very good way of getting to know people. And I can't see many people in our kingdom saying, no. Excuse me, but we're having a private party here.
Yeah, no,
I've never experienced that, thank God.
No, in my years here, I have never experienced, and even in the East Kingdom where I was from, I never experienced.
No, SA people tend to. We are a social group, so we tend to be social.
Yeah,
we can be, of course, introverts and all that, but we're still there to socialize. There was something you mentioned that I wanted to ask you more about, and now I have forgotten about it. We are talking a lot about food.
Yes.
Because we both love food. Clearly, we both love cooking. And sadly, I think I only enjoyed one or two of your feasts. But I can dream about the next one.
Yes.
And let's go into the little more sad part of this interview, which is the pandemic. You are right now being in a little bit of a limbo. You have a writ for a peerage, a Laurel.
Yeah, I have the writ. They will do it when they can. But my hope had been for 12th night coronation. And then things happened and our royals made the decision that they definitely wouldn't be able to travel out of Sweden by then. So everything up until spring crown was what was canceled at the kingdom level. Spring crown, unfortunately, is in Ireland, and the difficulty of getting there is just, and there are two people to be elevated at that spring crown.
Yeah.
Hold our thumbs, it happens. Or
and then, three, if all three of you go.
Yes, if there were three of us or the four of us, that's a bit much on a plate for
for
an event.
Just one weekend. So I guess you will be hanging in limbo now for a while longer.
Yeah.
We'll see about double wars maybe, or coronation.
Coronation is one of those, again, with the distance it is from me, that's a very big difficulty.
Yeah, it's up in another part of Sweden.
Yeah.
So that is a lot of hours to travel if you're not going by plane.
Yeah, and currently I have a mundane problem that prevents me from leaving continental Europe.
Mm.
Because of this situation, my passport has expired.
Ah,
And of course, the office to renew it wasn't open.
of course.
So getting it renewed is a difficulty that thankfully there have been ways and I'm working on it, but the time it will take is completely unknown. The normal turnaround time is about 6 weeks. I've been hearing reports of 3 to 6 months
Oh God.
on a turnaround.
Yeah.
So,
Looking at the world's situation right now, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if 3 or 6 months would actually be what it took. I mean, the world is kind of in a turmoil right now.
yes.
So, what are you doing to keep up your SEA except being in limbo and being like, ah?
Actually, quite a bit. I have a dress that I started as a project, originally to be done for April Crown. I had wanted, it was finally an event where I wasn't cooking. And normally I wear very simple garb, very plain garb that I can have in the kitchen. And I decided I wanted a fancy dress. Part of that is also I knew that, one of my best friends was going to be elevated to the Order of the Pelican.
Yes.
So I wanted to look nice and I wanted it to be fun. So I have the dress to keep me a bit busy. We are still planning events. We are still, holding our thumbs that Arts in April has been changed to Madness in May this year because our site wasn't available. So I'm starting to plan. It's a small feast for 40. If things are looking good, even for June, we will have a event called Midsummer Night's Dream, sort of based on the idea of a day and night court. And I will be planning the food for that. And then my Laurel is hosting an event in the United States. And I've got a side project of helping out to find and research a feast for that someone else will probably have to cook, but I can hand them all the planning.
You are keeping busy.
Yeah, I've got a couple new cookbooks. I've got, projects and stuff galore. We recently had our baronial investiture, so that we have a new baronial couple, and they need largesse, and so I've been coming up with ideas for that. And every Monday night, my barony hosts a Zoom get-together social where we talk about all sorts of stuff. And then out of ID, Guy has been running Cooks Corners for cooks to get together and talk. And currently in the works, there's a plan to do a virtual feast together.
Yes, and I'm going to put a link down here below again because Drachenwald has a Facebook group for people that are interested in cooking.
Yes, we have the Drachenwald Cooks Guild.
Exactly. So if people listening to this are interested in cooking or want to start cooking or have been cooking and just, want to talk cooking with people that
Yes.
also cook, go to that group on Facebook. Join us.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes, please join us.
I must admit that I might be the most active person on that group, but I enjoy reading what Guy is doing, and I'm looking forward to that online feast.
Yeah. And of course, there's a Laurel prize display that they're going to do online as well.
Yes.
And I will actually attend that as well. And sort of as cooking is a hard art to follow. If I make a dress, I can send it with someone to a competition in the furthest reaches of the kingdom. But I can't exactly send my cooking. There are some dishes you can make that would hold up to the travel, etc. But it's a very delicate thing generally. So really a lot of people say, who do cook and do it as an art say, well, how do I get it seen? How do I get it out there? And I sort of want to do things like the prize display and stuff like that to show we can show different aspects of what we do, even in a virtual situation or at a distance, we can still present and get seen for what we do.
Because that was the one I was going to ask you, and I kind of went too blank. Because there is generally an opinion that cooks hide in the kitchen, or, well, not maybe hide, but they are invisible. They don't get recognized as much as perhaps other people that do both service and arts. And it sounds a little bit like you're agreeing with that statement, that it is hard to be seen, to present your art.
Yeah, as an art. And there are two groups of people who I find sort of fall into this category. And that is the scribes and the cooks. Because the scribal endeavors, people get to see, sometimes what's done. But it's like the cook, unless you're right there for that presentation, etc. You don't always get to see, what art they are producing. But the art is also a service. It's a gift to the kingdom and the person receiving it. And so a lot of, I think a lot of scribes and a lot of cooks get sort of, well, you're service oriented because you're doing something for other people. And it's like, yes, but this is also, a piece of me, and it's also art.
Yeah, it's both art and service at the same time. And
Yeah.
I do think I agree with you there that both the scribal arts and the cooking arts are maybe the two ones where it's most obvious. I'm sure there are other pieces that
Yes.
have this problem, but for me, being both a scribe and a cook is like, yes. So do you think that we now, the pandemic started doing a lot of stuff online?
Yes.
And people have voiced opinion that, hey, this is actually something good that can come out of the bad. And we hope that it continues. Do you think that it will be easier for scribes and cooks to maybe show their art and their service if we continue to do the online thing? Or is it still a little bit like, yeah, I can see you cooking, but I can't taste it?
Yeah. And that's a difficulty because, I mean, you don't eat a scribal work. So it's not consumed, I guess, is the best way I should put it.
It should not be consumed ever.
Yeah. Once a feast is consumed, though, it's gone. It's done. Nobody who wasn't there can ever experience it. Even if I cook the dishes somewhere else for other people, it turns into a different experience.
Absolutely.
And so I think online will help get people seen, especially with things like the online feast and stuff like that. But there will still be an aspect, always be an aspect of, because it's a consumable, like, people who brew, people who do mead, once it's consumed, it's like, it was great. I wish you could have been there.
Yeah. And people usually talk about feasts so much, like if they're talking about an event, especially the shorter events, the feast is kind of like the thing you talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, you should have been there. You should have tasted that pie or so on. But for the people who wasn't there, it's
like, describe it. Give me more.
And it's interesting that you say, well, you can recreate the dish, but I think that you have to be like a Michelin-starred chef to actually be producing a dish the exact same way just by cooking, and then you have the experience around.
The experience around it, yeah.
And it is for me, it's like, well, recreating dishes. For me, I can make the same pie 10 times. It will be more or less the same pie, but there will always be differences.
I have a couple of dishes that do that to me. I have one recipe that I'd like to throw it off a cliff. I will never be satisfied with it, I think. It is a chickpea soup.
Oh.
And it's perfectly fine in a certain amount. But when you try and make it larger for larger groups, you have to really playing with it way too much.
And that is also one thing when it comes to cooking in art, presenting your art, because some dishes do that. Some dishes are really fine. You can make it for 5 people. You can make it for 150 people. It's like, cooked rice doesn't really matter. But when it comes to like this chickpea soup that you're talking about, I have also recipes like that where it's like, it's fine to a certain amount of people, but then it just doesn't work. It just doesn't
and then
work
it stops working.
200 people. It will be dry or strange texture, or it will be not the same flavor. It can still taste good, but it will just not be the same. So that is also a thing when it comes to cooks. How do you
because sometimes you don't know that it's not going to expand until you get there. So really you have to be flexible. I find as a cook, you really have to be a flexible person in expectation. You can't be one of those rigid, but I did the recipe exactly as it told me to, and it didn't work. And it's like, you gotta be willing to be.
And this is the thing with spices. You can't just, if you have a recipe, you can't just, okay, I'm going to do it 10 times and just do 10 times everything in that recipe.
No.
I had one that sadly didn't know that, and he was supposed to do figs in wine, and you have white pepper in that. And he just doubled it 10 times. And we put cream in it, we put whiskey in it, we put sugar in it, everything that take down the spice. It was tasty at the end, but it was not figs in wine. It was more figs in cream and whiskey.
Yes.
Because you have to like, and this is also something that when you are enlarging your recipe, sometimes it just goes like no.
Always, when it comes to spicing, I always start slow when I have expanded a recipe. If I have to quadruple the recipe, I will double the spices, and then I will keep testing. And one of the big things to keep in mind is the earlier you put the spice in, the more time it has to infuse into the food. Mm-hmm. So really, spices are something that really needs to sort of come later in anything that's liquidy, definitely.
Yeah, and also if you, it depends how much spice you can have in stuff. It also depends on how much fat in form of cream or milk or other stuff that you have. Sometimes I have a it's not actually a period recipe, but it's a period-ish recipe, and people always beg me for the recipe for this. It's a red beet pie with mushrooms.
Ooh.
So you have pickled red beets, and you have mushroom, and you have red onions, and you basically take 1/3 of each, put it in a mixer, and then put it in a pie shell, and you put an egg cream mixture over that, and then cheese, lots of cheese. And the thing is, that pie, for some reason, can swallow more or less any amount of black pepper.
Yes.
You put in black pepper, and you put in black pepper, and you put in salt, and you put in salt, and you think this is going to be horrible, and no.
No. And that's where cooking isn't just an art. There is science in there. There is, when trying to find the balance of spices, and why is my soup not thickening, and why is, why does this random recipe have ground up nuts in it? So people who are intimidated by period cooking, it's partially because they don't understand the science yet that they were using. Now, they didn't know it was science.
No.
They just knew when they did these things, this stuff happens. But yeah, you have foods that will swallow spices. Pumpkin.
Yes.
Pumpkin actually swallows spices quite a bit as well.
And speaking about the medieval recipes, I also noticed that, well, medieval recipes never tend to actually give you an amount of stuff.
Oh, yeah, no.
No.
Until late period.
Yeah, late period has, but early period, and then we're talking like the book Form of Curry, no. Or right now, I'm blanking on the name, but the Danish cookbook from 13th century, I think it is. No, it's basically like, so you take an ox tongue and you boil it, and then you chop it up, and then you mix it with these spices. Hep. And there you stand like,
How much of those spices?
how long will you boil it? Will you boil it with salt and pepper, or just salt, or just...
You boil anything with salt.
Yes.
The thing is, salt is not mentioned, but it is a constant. And the idea that salt was, if it wasn't mentioned, it wasn't used because it was so expensive. And it's like, there were various types of salts. And the clean salts were the ones that were expensive, but you could get dirty salt. You could get, dirty salt is the only word I have for it.
I think I understand what you mean. I'm going to see if I can find the right term, if that is the right term for it.
Well, mined salt. Salt from a salt mine is dirty unless it's cleaned, because it actually has dirt and grit and stuff from the mine that it comes from. As opposed to sea salt, which has different sorts of things, but also sea salt needs to be purified as well. Almost every salt needs to be cleaned. And because it's a crystal, you can melt it down, clean out all of the sediment and stuff that shouldn't be in there, and then re-solidify it. And it will return into crystals, and then you just break it up. Sugar is the same way.
Mm-hmm. And the idea that salt was expensive and they didn't use it, well, they did use salt to preserve food a lot. So that's also mean that sometimes they might not mention salt because the ingredient in itself was so salty that
was salted.
You didn't need any more salt.
Yeah, I mean, we are very lucky modernly that you can go to a grocery store and get fresh cuts of meat. But they didn't slaughter a cow 2 days before they were gonna, eat beef. And when they did slaughter it, they had to preserve it or else it would go bad. So,
and also here we come into the one that you were talking about, the event where you learn how to take care of every single part of it.
Yes.
In a whole cow, that is a lot of food.
That's a lot of meat.
I mean, just a sheep is a lot of food, and it can feed a family for quite a while, especially
quite a while.
not
You know.
just take, because the modern days is basically like we take the best part of it. They didn't do that.
No, you had to use everything. I mean, mince pie came about because you would butcher and you would cut the roast nicely, but you still had pieces of scraps of meat hanging on your bone. So you'd take your knife and you'd scrape all that off to get as much of the meat as you could. And then, of course, they would then boil the bones in order to have, stock and soup. And that was a constant.
And some bones were used for glue too, I think. We have bone glue.
Yep. Bone glues.
Fish bones more than.
Yeah, fish bones are really good for glue. They will break down better. Is the best way I.
So
but gelatin.
gelatin. Yeah.
Gelatin was made from bone and hoof and.
Yeah. All
bits.
The nasty part of the animal. And let us not go into the dish haggis.
I am not a fan of what they call offal, which is all of the inside bits. My cooking very much reflects that I cook around my own personal allergies, and my own personal distastes, and every cook does. So I applaud those that actually like things like liver and kidney, etc., but not for me.
No, and I agree with you. We have a Scandinavian version of haggis that's called pulsa, which is very similar it's made different, but it's kind of the same bits and parts, and you have corn grain and stuff in it. And I loved it when I was a child.
Not so much as an adult.
No, I don't know why I loved it as a child, but my taste has changed. Anyhow, this turned into more or less a cooking class than an interview of you. But I do wanted to talk cooking with you, because I do know that you are one of Drachenwald's, and I say one of because we do have many, but you are one of Drachenwald's most and best cooks. Can we say that?
Sure.
Yes. I mean, I do know that you kind of breathe and live cooking.
Yes.
So thank you for speaking about it and having patience with me and speaking about all this. Before we end this interview, is there something that you think that I have forgotten to ask you, that like, oh, I really wanted to tell people about this?
I don't know. I like to talk about cooking. So. Yes.
I did forget to ask you, though, about your favorite piece of garb that I usually ask people.
Oh, and I actually have it outside here with me. I'm not a textile person, as I've mentioned. I don't sew. I don't like to if I don't have to. And there was an online auction to benefit one of the travel guilds of, I think, the West Kingdom. And one of the things you could get was an apron.
Ooh.
And the person who was making it was Duchess Zenobia. And she had privately messaged me and said, if you don't happen to win it, I'll make you one for a donation to the kingdom at whatever your highest bid was. But I did win. And so
I can see why that is your favorite.
And the smocking's in 2 different colors. It's in yellow and green. And while there's no historical precedence for any sort of thing,
screw that, it's lovely.
Exactly, it's beautiful.
Yes.
And it's a joy for her to have made, because she's made others, and everyone wears them as one of those little decorative aprons. And she knows that I wear mine in the kitchen, that I have cooked in it. It has been covered in stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I know how my apron tends to look, and my shirts.
Yeah.
We were just the other day talking about the time I dropped a container of blueberry cream.
Oh my.
Yeah. That shirt never really recovered from that. But that apron, I have had two smocked aprons, and for some reason they have gotten little feet and tripped away from me.
Oh.
I don't think I have lent them to people. I think I mostly forgotten them somewhere in some kitchens, or I have lent them to people, and I don't know. The sad part about that was that one of them was actually from a gift from a friend, and I was like, ah.
Yeah.
But mine have been white though, and now I'm like, ooh, maybe make a
Colored aprons are quite period, and the one of the aprons I want to make is found in 16th century Italian paintings, and it's a slate blue color. And it's the same color that they use in scrubs in surgery. That blue color, because this is gonna sound terrible, but it hides blood.
Yeah.
It hides blood. So it was worn in kitchens, especially where animal butchery was happening, because
Yes.
you know.
Because when you are in a kitchen, you will get dirty.
Yes.
I usually have, I don't know the English word for it. We call it slang, which basically is a word for something that you just toss.
Okay.
It's a piece of fabric. It's a towel, and it's a piece of just a rectangular piece of linen, and you use it for everything. Taking hot stuff out of the oven.
Yeah.
Wiping your hands. Wiping off stuff from the counter. In that one is what I use to kind of make sure my apron doesn't look completely horrible.
Yeah. I completely understand. I mean, I even so far have walked into court with both of my hands covered in like stuff. I was making fritters, so I had the fritter batter on one hand, and I had been rolling the balls of chicken in the other hand. And I got called out of the kitchen to go to court, and I'm like, well, if I wash my hands, they're just going to get dirty again. So I went like that.
That's when you hope nobody gives you a gift, or if they do, that someone else can take care of it.
Yeah, I was presented with an award, and thankfully they set this girl aside so that I could have it, later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would not touch a scroll with dirty hands.
Do not touch the scroll with dirty hands.
So, to end this lovely chat with you, I do hope that we get a chance in the near future to be in the kitchen together.
Yes.
I think we would have fun. It would probably be, I'm not sure if the kingdom would survive it, but we will have fun.
The kingdom survived me traveling to university and hopping into the kitchen with that crew. And we were quite an interesting group.
It's in the kitchen the party happens.
Exactly. The best parties always happen in the kitchen.
Yes. And also, please, I think I mentioned it in some other interview, but please remember, people, that when a cook has stand there cooking feast for hours and hours, she or he or they are really tired. Please come in and help us with the dishes, and we will give you extra treats.
I have been grateful that almost every event I've cooked for, there has been dish fairies. So I leave the kitchen and I don't have to think about it anymore.
For me, it was not that way around when I started.
No, when I started, it wasn't that way, but
it has become more and more like that now, and I am so thankful, because yeah, You
Yeah.
stand on your feet for at least 2 days.
Yeah. You know, we are ever so grateful for the dish fairies who come in and take care of.
And I usually have, some cookies or some extra treats for them because they are so appreciated.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think we can end that this lovely hour with wine and cookies for everyone, especially dish.
Wine and cookies. Oh.
Thank you so much for doing this for me. Love to talk to you, and I do hope that you will get your Laurel vigil soon.
I am thinking that it will be probably summer.
Yeah.
Is my best guess.
But let's hope for summer at least, and
Yeah.
I will try to be there.
Yeah, I am hoping for everybody that, this slows down. I understand it won't go away. I mean, part of researching history is the fact that we've had plagues before and we know how this goes. And we do know that is about a 3-year timeline of up and down and up and down. And while we have modern medicine, it still takes time. And so I'm hoping, if they can get it under control, for at least a short period of time, so we can get some stuff done.
Yes. So we can get back a little bit of the sense of normal. Whatever normal is, but I think you get what I mean. So yeah, let's all say bye to our viewers.